Good evening, good evening. Hello everybody. Welcome. In honor of our guest, we are going to hold this gallery talk in English. I hope that's okay with everybody. If there are any questions or uncertainties in what we are saying or what it means, feel free to ask, and I try to translate it for you. Although I did find out yesterday, Johnny, that you were spent some time in Leipzig.
Yeah.
So your German
is
a bit rusty because of the thick accent in Leipzig, right? It's too strong. But yes, this is going to be in English, and we both agreed to try to keep it as concise as possible. Kurz und knackig, as they say, and afterwards you have the chance to ask some questions if you'd like, and mingle more and have more drinks. All right. So, welcome again to this talk. It's the third talk in our very long history of the gallery, 3 years. And I'm very excited it's with you, Johnny. Thank you so much for agreeing with this. And we're so excited to have you and to have this show here. I'm going to say a couple of things first before I ask some questions. Well, first of all, I think we should be very thankful that we can all be here in these difficult times we've had, and for somebody like Johnny to actually travel, so that's 2 times excitement, not just the show, but also to have him physically here. And hopefully, yes, all of this is going to end sometime soon. To discover new work in today's time is a little different than what it may have been before. And I became aware of Johnny's work online because of a show you were in with an artist I work with, which is Sarah Anstis. And I saw the image and thought, this is fantastic. And then I asked Sarah, because I couldn't travel to London, if it is as good as I think it is, and she said, yes, it's even better. So that was already a good start, and with a lot of confidence, I then arranged to try to see you. We met in this in your studio in, is it Southeast London? Is that
Southwest.
Southwest,
yeah,
Southwest
yeah.
London. Very cozy little studio. As you can imagine, quite very cute.
It was, yeah.
You're not there anymore, but very hard to reach. It took me, I think, nearly 2 hours to get there, and the worst was, by the way, to get away from there again. It was almost impossible, and it took me, I don't know, 2.5 hours until I was somewhere near Central. Anyway, I was surrounded by an array of paintings, drawings by Johnny, and I was immediately enchanted by them. The effect was very immediate, both suggestive and funny, as you can see here. And I was mostly taken by the curious subjects they depict, and the way the works were made. And we're going to talk a little bit about this later on. I had a really strong response to them. And it stayed with me ever since, and the conviction grew or hardened that I really wanted to do a show with me. So I'm so happy that this has become possible now. And when I arrived back from London last week, when I finally could travel again, the works were all here in this show, but they were wrapped up, and I was excited like opening Christmas presents, which I told you about, because I knew these works, one or two from the studio, and they were dark, and the studio was quite dark too. There wasn't much light, and I was like, what's this dark show going to be like? And I'm very happy to have been realizing that these works are only dark in the beginning. And there is something magical happening about them. The longer you look at them, they reveal themselves, they become clearer. I ask you to, well, you all have spent some time already here, but they are not quick things you can pass by. You take your time and you realize you'll see more suddenly after some time. It's the eye adapts itself to the painting, and you'll see more clearly and you see it brighter. And I thought that's a very interesting phenomenon. So I'm going to continue. I think one of those that's I think the most immediate reaction that you have in this work. They're dark, and then you think you realize there's more to it. And I think that my question would be, if you, in terms of the technique, is this something you had in mind wanting to achieve, or is this something that happened while you were working? Because also they're made in a very special way. Maybe you can say something about the scrap on canvas.
Yeah, so the material that I use is this crepe fabric, which a lot of like clothes are sometimes made of. I just got into a fabric shop about 2.5, 3 years ago and tried to find a fabric which would stretch like a canvas, but which had enough texture so it would like hold the pigment in it as you rubbed it in. So I use like these dry pigments and soft pastels kind of ground up, and then rubbing them in with bits of cloth or with brushes, or sometimes these pastel pencils, which are also really powdery. So basically the fabric itself creates the mark making as much as you applying the marks with a brush. So then everything starts to become a bit more blurred, and that's why I was quite interested to make a show of quite dark paintings, because the images already, the colours already kind of tend to merge into each other, and I tend not to make paintings at any time with loads of different colours going on. But with these I could start with like this really dark blue surface on the crepe, and then add colours that never really become completely separate from each other. Always kind of, they always have this blue or dark brown undertone to them.
Is that you apply the brown first?
Yeah, there's like this layer of dark blue or dark brown first, and all the colours sit on top of that.
Because we wrote in the press release, the works are colored by the half-light of dusk.
Mm-hmm.
Did you paint them actually at dusk?
No. I can't really work past 6 or 7. I tend to start really early in the day.
Okay.
Because I think if I were painting them later, then it actually becomes quite difficult because it's too dark to see what I'm working on with these things. It can be quite subtle and erring. So I tend to work when it's really light, so that I always lighten them and being later to be able to see what I'm doing.
Why are they essentially dark in this particular series?
I think I was quite interested by this idea of doing paintings at night, and normally when people paint at night there's like this feeling of them being quite sinister or quite creepy or something, and I wanted to bring that kind of like, my works tend to be quite playful or quite camp and stuff, and I wanted to bring that into this kind of dark feeling. So that they've always been quite quiet, because there's like this quite considered nature to their compositions, or the way that I'm looking at stuff, and the process being so slow, there's never like those feeling of movement in them, because they're quite laborious to make, so it doesn't have that fresh feeling of brush strokes that are really quick. So then they always have this quietness to them, and I thought that would be quite a good setting already to have it at dusk, when like, kind of like you're walking around this house where maybe some things have happened, like the petals are falling off, or someone's been drawing, but it's all quiet now.
I think a strong quality about that, about the works, is that they grab your attention by, although they are quiet. So they kind of, without being loud, they grab your attention. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a great quality in today's time, especially in the days where so much else is so loud to grab someone's attention. And I think it'd be interesting to understand a little bit why, you know, or how the subject matters as such come about, because we read, or people read, that you looked at at images online, and then you make the works from the images you choose. Is that, how much is related to this, how much is owned the way you make things now to the situation we were in the last 2 years, in terms of how you approach works and paintings, and or how much of this is maybe the way you've done things anyway for some time?
Yeah, I guess that's what was quite lucky about my practice, is that I never have to go out and look for stuff necessarily outdoors. I tend to find all my imagery online. But I found with this show, what was quite weird is that it became a lot more autobiographical in a sense than I'd ever kind of expected it to be. Like, I think I was working on all these images, and like when I'm doing a show like this, I never really have like a narrative or a particular idea in mind, but then the imagery kind of feeds into one another, and then eventually stuff starts to repeat, and there seems to be like motifs, like the shoes and stuff. And I think there was a lot of moments in this show where I'd made a piece thinking it was just about like, kind of like the dog or the shoes. I was thinking like, oh, what's the most familiar kind of, what's the most dog that I could find? Or like, what's the most shoes I could find? And I think I thought that I'd found this by just typing in shoes to Google and then thinking what I considered to be the most shoes. But then I think I realised that I was wearing those shoes, and also that this dog, once I painted that, I'd send a picture to my parents of the painting, and they were like, oh, that's our dog. And I was like, oh, yes, it is your dog. So I think I had realised that I was painting a lot more stuff that was familiar to me, but then finding it through like source imagery, so that it just became more and more distant from a reality into just like this world of represented objects. Or yeah, I think I realised these were definitely things that surrounded me in my own life, and then I went looking for them on the internet.
And you found them.
And I found them there.
It sounds like Siri almost.
Yeah.
It listens to you, and then you think it's your own choice, but actually it has been catered towards you, almost. In that sense, there is a question I've asked in the press release, and maybe you can answer it, which is there psychological or creative significance to the scattered pencils and lit cigarettes?
I mean, I do find it quite interesting why the cigarettes keep coming up. Maybe it is because I keep wanting a cigarette while I'm making the work. But I think, yeah, in the same way that these are things, like, these feel like my studio, these ones with the pencils, because I'm constantly drawing, and then this one over here that I'm looking at with the drawing of the foot and the drawing of the squash, which is the squash being over here. These are drawings that exist in my studio, and then the pencils. There definitely is this sense of someone having worked on these and snapping these pencils and then smoking these cigarettes. So they do feel more like snapshots of my studio, in a sense. And then this book, in this other scattered still life, there's like that book on alpine flowers, which is the book I used to find the flowers for the flower arrangement thing. So I guess it just, the more I spent in the studio working on these works, the more the stuff in my studio started becoming part of the works, and that's very nice.
And they're almost elevated. So we speak about this monumentality in their scale. Can you talk about making them monumental and scaling them in that way, and applying a clear significance to them.
Yeah, I mean, part of it is I think there's a certain...
Of everyday objects.
Yeah,
Very, not banal, but like very, objects you wouldn't maybe otherwise pay so much attention to.
Yeah, and I think that's what I find quite interesting sometimes is, especially with a process that's sometimes very frustrating and sometimes takes like a long time. I like the kind of absurdity of spending ages making like this huge pair of shoes. I think there's something quite comical in that. And like, yeah, just something quite absurd that artists do that we just spend so long doing something that is like in and of itself quite ludicrous, like painting a huge pair of shoes. I think that's quite interesting psychologically, that that's something someone would choose to do. And I think, so then that's kind of what I find interesting about making these really monumental paintings that take a long time, relative to my practice there, but over something quite boring, mundane.
And the pictures speak obviously to a variety of art histories, which we all recognize quickly, I'm sure, or may recognize. The trompe l'oeil, of course, a little bit 17th century type Dutch flower paintings. Cubism is in it, and then surrealism, and obviously the Domenico Nioli, who I think we're both great fans of, and who has got a little bit of a revival now. I mean, I'm not sure he was away, but the retrospective in the Prada right now, everybody talks about. And one cannot help to see those influences in the Cubism, maybe in these car paintings over there, the rigorous sort of structure to the paintings. The Dutch flower painting influence there, of course. And I would love to understand, maybe start with like one particular painting, for example. The car painting over there, you said it comes from the internet, the source. But where does this particular come from? The repetitive cars over there.
Oh yeah, the source was just one toy car that then I repeated a lot of times, and I kind of morphed it a bit so I had this strange angle to it. So it doesn't really go back, it kind of sits flat, and then repeated it a lot of times. So like, definitely space is something that's quite, I want to play with a lot. Like they have a very flat sense of space. And I once read something about, like, obviously all of the works are still lives, and I was quite interested to make, apart from maybe the cars version to something else. But I wanted to make a thing about still lives, and I once read this book that was saying that in still life painting, they often have like a really shallow depth of field, and people kind of consider them to be because they have the more depth of field, the more meaning a painting had. That still lives just were painting in and of itself an object. Like didn't really talk about anything other than that at times. And so I thought it kind of worked well with my painting being so flat. But then the perspective at times are kind of toppling over in front. Like these still lives with the scattered objects, they're kind of stuff that we may not read them as if they go back onto a table, but they're really like flat up. Which is more like the early Renaissance kind of.
The early Renaissance, yes.
Yeah, where they haven't quite worked out how perspective works.
Exactly, they hadn't quite figured it out yet.
And I like the idea that you can just kind of maybe throw a shadow on something and it's meant to read as more 3D. Or having more depth to the painting. So they're kind of, things trying to persuade us that they exist in real life, but they're actually just quite crude assemblages of objects on a table. And the cars, the pattern is again similar to this idea of the big shoes, that someone could spend a long time meticulously repeating a car in a pattern.
They're very laborious. I think everybody can see that. How much of these paintings that are clearly in your paintings too, or those art histories. Did you how much did you study those works from those periods? For example, if you visit areas in Italy where the early Renaissance started, you know, did you see all the Botticellis and all the rest of them?
I mean, I've been very confined to the galleries in London for the last 2 years, so I definitely saw what I could there in the National Gallery, but my early Renaissance but yeah, sadly I haven't been able to see all the paintings that I in person. But then I guess that's why a lot of them repeat in the reproduction of images. Is quite I use a bit in my work. I guess so again you have this sense that it's all this world's completely built from my studio or my sketchbook or my laptop and the books that I'm reading.
Things are immediately accessible now. You don't have to necessarily leave home to make great art. You went to a fantastic school, the Slade School, which is an infamous school in Britain. You would say you had a good education there.
Yeah, I did my master's there, and that's kind of when I started to work in this way. I was in the painting department there, and they had quite a focus on thinking about your materials, maybe a bit more than my undergrad. Did more like I was at a point where I wanted to think a bit more about my materials at that point, and that's when I started to work on this way of working. And yeah, the idea of how I wanted to apply paint, just thinking a bit more deliberately than maybe I had done.
I think from my side, I've asked most of the questions that I wanted to know more about, because I was also curious what you were going to tell me. And I do open it up to the floor if there is anybody else who has a question. Please.
I'm very interested in material crate, because I had a friend who also went down that route with the material when they were in London. And I look at the material, and I look at this piece here, in particular the suit, the pinstripe, and also the suit here. And what I can see a linkage, and I'd be interested to see if there's something in your awareness or that might link to it, is that for me brings in crepe material, and the way that when a suit is made handmade with that material, a piece of chalk is then taken and used as the gauge for making the cuts. Because when I look at your technique and the material and pastels, it feels delicate. I know from speaking with your parents, you've looked into that and you've made it a piece that will not be delicate for whoever takes it. But that's something I see as a way that it might have morphed into what you have.
Yeah, I mean there is a delicacy in the feeling of them when you're looking at them because of the fact they're made in powder. Obviously they're not fit, so they're not going to move. But I do like the idea that yeah, they feel. I guess it feeds into this idea that they do maybe feel like memories or like things that we've seen before, and the material feel like they feel like they're just appearing or they could disappear.
That's exactly what I see. I see something that's not rigid, but it's something which you can come back in a day or a week, and it just doesn't feel like it's a rigid snapshot. It's something that's there that will linger. Yeah.
Do you know this dog, by the way?
This dog? No, this is the dog that I thought looked. Well, it turned out it was a lot like my parents. But the dog itself was of the internet. But it is remarkably similar.
I'm wondering, is there an issue with durability of the material?
In terms
Let's
of
hope not.
In terms of, like, I don't know, fading out
durability.
colours with time?
To my knowledge, no. I've been previous works. It's never been a problem. They're sprayed a lot with UV protected, fixed and varnish.
There's no long-term experiences, I guess.
No, exactly.
So it's a new material.
Yeah, I've been working like this for 4 or 5 years now, maybe 4 years. There's not been any issues.
But the fixture is a very well-known product, and that's supposed to really make paintings last. Pastel, it's mainly used for pastel, right? Yeah. So hopefully they last forever. Yes. Any more questions? No? No? Well then, I thank you very much, Johnny. Thank you so much. And please.